One of my clergy colleagues shared this story on Facebook. On a church just a short distance from ours, there's a sign advertising their Easter service. It says, "He's not here." Now I know what they were going for, but the altar guild worker and I had a laugh this afternoon because we were tempted to add a sign below. That's because he's over there with the Episcopalians. And an arrow pointing in our direction. We didn't, but it was tempting. The question of where we find Jesus is certainly the question of the day. The 3-year cycle of the Revised Common Lectionary gives us a different resurrection story each year. And this year, we encounter Mark's resurrection story, which in many ways seems the most incomplete. Most ancient authorities bring the book to a close at the end of the text we read today. But other authorities found it unsatisfying, so they added a shorter ending or a longer ending. It's like someone who writes a book and keeps toying with the ending because it just doesn't seem to work. It doesn't give quite the right sense of conclusion. But I love Mark's resurrection story for just that reason. These women are not idealized, and we can easily identify with them. They see a strange man and hear his strange news, and they bolt for home in shock so they can reflect on what they've been told. Doesn't that seem to fit with the reality we know and with the skeptical culture we inhabit today? In this age of the 24-hour news cycle, we're constantly bombarded by incredible news stories. I don't know about you, but I often find that I need to take some time to think about what something means. To me, personally, to the people who surround me, to the people who are the most vulnerable, and to my culture, my nation, and the whole world. Maybe the response of these poor women seems plausible to us. Why wouldn't they run away in distress and fear and try to understand what had just happened? Life often makes sense only in retrospect, wouldn't you say? Now, I know some of you have heard this story before, but when I was a student pastor, I used to regularly visit a man named Sid, who 3 years earlier had suffered a stroke. One day, I set out to visit a woman who had recently been widowed when something made me change my mind. I decided to visit Sid instead. When I arrived at his door, his wife Marge told me that he had just gone to bed for a nap, but she would see if he was still awake. As it turned out, he was, and he was happy to see me. I didn't stay long because I knew that he was tired, but our conversation seemed different from the start. He thanked me for all that I had done for him. And then he focused on me, which made me a little uncomfortable. He gave me encouragement that I should complete my studies and become a pastor. And then he did something he'd never done before. He told me he loved me. And it was a heartwarming experience, but I didn't really understand it. Then early the next morning, it all made sense in a way that couldn't easily be explained. I was called by my supervising pastor at home and told to go directly to the hospital, that Sid had had another stroke. I spent time with Sid's wife and children waiting and praying. And by the end of that day, incredibly, Sid was dead. As I walked out of the hospital, there was a glorious sunset, and I remembered Sid's words to me from the day before that seemed so uncharacteristic. And then it hit me. He was saying goodbye. I don't know how he knew, or if it was for his benefit or my own, but his words only made sense in retrospect. So here's a question for you. Do you have a story like my own, when Jesus seemed to be undeniably present to you, maybe only in retrospect? Do you have a moment you'd like to think about again, when Jesus was present to you in suffering or in healing or through a special blessing. The women are told that Jesus is going ahead of them and will meet them there. I can't imagine a more heartening promise, and when they've had a chance to think about it and to think about his predictions, in retrospect it will all make sense. And then nothing will stop them, or the church founded on his life, death, and resurrection. Imagine what a quaint little story this might have been, with a few devoted students and teachers of the story scattered in a few isolated places in the world, who gathered together regularly to discuss its implications and what might have happened if it had been true. And now, think about this perfect ending for the book of Mark. We aren't told that these women did what they were asked to do. Again, we have to go back in order to understand what probably happened. All the way back to the beginning of this first of the Gospels. Chapter 1, verse 1 starts out the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Why is it good news? Why is he called the Son of God? You have to read the story to understand that, and to believe that these women would become the first apostles, the sent ones, to bring the good news to their brothers and to the many who were dying to hear the most hopeful news in the world. Death has been defeated. He is risen. Hallelujah.